Shocking orca attack. Lifeguard Mia Thompson's final moments. How will this story turn out? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The waves crashed rhythmically against the shoreline, their frothy edges glinting under the midday sun. It was a picture-perfect day at Blue Horizon Beach, where locals and tourists alike gathered to bask in the beauty of the ocean. Children laughed as they played in the shallows, their sandcastles standing proudly against the tide. Lifeguard Mia Thompson stood on her elevated post, scanning the horizon with practiced precision. Her bright red uniform and yellow rescue vest stood out starkly against the azure sky, a beacon of safety for everyone on the beach. Mia had always been drawn to the ocean. From a young age, she'd spent countless hours exploring tide pools, snorkeling through coral reefs, and dreaming of a life surrounded by marine life. Becoming a lifeguard had been a natural choice, a way to merge her passion for the sea with her drive to help others. Over the years, she had become a fixture at Blue Horizon Beach, her calm demeanor and quick reflexes saving more lives than she could count. But the ocean, with all its beauty and tranquility, held secrets. Beneath the surface, it was a world of unpredictability, a realm where nature's rules reigned supreme. Mia understood this better than most. She had witnessed riptides dragging swimmers into peril, jellyfish stings reducing grown adults to tears, and sharks circling too close for comfort. Yet, none of these encounters had prepared her for what was about to unfold. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a distant splash. Mia's sharp eyes caught the disturbance beyond the breakers, where the water seemed to churn unnaturally. She reached for her binoculars, adjusting the focus to get a clearer view. What she saw made her heart race, a dorsal fin slicing through the water, followed by a massive black and white body. An orca. Mia's mind raced as she considered the implications. Orcas, also known as killer whales, were rarely seen so close to shore. They were intelligent and powerful predators, known to work in pods to hunt seals, fish, and even other whales. This one, however, appeared to be alone. Its movements were erratic, its sleek body breaching the surface before disappearing into the depths. The beachgoers remained blissfully unaware, their laughter and chatter carrying on undisturbed. Mia climbed down from her post, her whistle dangling from her neck as she approached the water's edge. She needed to assess the situation before deciding whether to raise the alarm. Orcas were not typically a threat to humans, but their size and strength made them unpredictable, especially if they were injured or disoriented. As Mia waded into the shallows, the orca breached again, closer this time. She could see its distinctive white-eye patch and the sheen of its wet skin. It was magnificent, a creature of raw power and beauty, but something about its movements made her uneasy. It thrashed in the water, its dorsal fin cutting through the waves like a knife. It was struggling. Instinct took over as Mia signaled to her fellow lifeguards, waving her arms to catch their attention. "We've got an orca in distress," she called out, her voice carrying over the sound of the waves. Two of her colleagues, Jake and Clara, hurried to her side, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. "An orca?" Jake asked, scanning the water. "That's rare." Clara nodded, her brow furrowed. "It looks like it's caught on something." Mia didn't hesitate. "We need to help it. Get the rescue board and the ropes." Jake and Clara exchanged a glance before rushing to the equipment shed. Mia's reputation for fearless action was well earned, but even they knew this situation was unprecedented. Helping an animal as large and powerful as an orca was a daunting task, but they trusted Mia's judgment implicitly. By the time they returned with the equipment, the orca had moved closer to the shore, its massive body partially visible beneath the waves. Mia grabbed the rescue board, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Stay on standby," she instructed Jake and Clara. "I'm going out there." As Mia paddled toward the orca, the distance between them seemed to stretch endlessly. The water grew deeper and colder, its clarity fading as she ventured further from the shore. The orca's thrashing grew more pronounced, its powerful tail sending sprays of water into the air. Mia's heart pounded in her chest as she approached, her mind racing with calculations and contingency plans. When she was within a few feet of the orca, she could see the cause of its distress. A thick fishing net had ensnared its tail, the heavy nylon cutting into its flesh. Blood mingled with the water, creating a crimson haze that trailed behind the struggling creature. Mia's breath caught in her throat at the sight. The pain and fear in the orca's movements were palpable, a stark reminder of the unintended consequences of human activity. "It's okay," Mia murmured, her voice barely audible over the crashing waves. She knew the orca couldn't understand her words, but she hoped her tone would convey her intentions. "I'm here to help." Mia reached for the knife strapped to her rescue vest, her fingers trembling as she prepared to cut the net. The orca thrashed again, its massive body creating a wave that nearly toppled her from the board. She steadied herself, her resolve unwavering. "Easy, big guy," she said softly. "I've got you." She began sawing through the net, the tension in the nylon fibers making the task slow and painstaking. The orca's movements grew less frantic, as if sensing that Mia was trying to help. Its dark eyes, intelligent and piercing, seemed to lock onto hers for a brief moment, a silent connection passing between them. From the shore, Jake and Clara watched with bated breath, their hands gripping the ropes in case they needed to pull Mia back. The beachgoers had begun to gather, their murmurs of curiosity turning to gasps of awe and concern as they realized what was happening. Children pointed excitedly, while parents whispered reassurances that the lifeguard knew what she was doing. Mia was unaware of the crowd. Her entire focus was on the task at hand. The knife cut deeper into the net, and she felt the tension begin to release. "Almost there," she said, her voice steady despite the exertion. "Just a little more." Finally, with a sharp snap, the last strand of the net gave way. The orca let out a powerful exhale, its body stilling as the weight of the net fell away. Mia leaned back on the rescue board, her arms trembling with relief. "You're free," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face. But the relief was short-lived. As the orca moved away from the net, its behavior shifted. It breached the surface with a powerful leap, its body twisting in midair before crashing back into the water. The sudden display of energy sent a wave rippling toward Mia, rocking her rescue board. She gripped the edges tightly, her pulse quickening. "What's it doing?" Jake shouted from the shore, his voice tinged with panic. Mia didn't have time to respond. The orca's movements became erratic once more, its tail slapping the water with a force that sent sprays of salt water into the air. It turned toward Mia, its massive body cutting through the waves like a torpedo. Mia's heart sank as she realized the danger she was in. The orca, likely disoriented and in pain, was charging straight toward her. Mia's instincts kicked in as the orca hurtled toward her, its sleek body slicing through the water with terrifying precision. She paddled furiously, her arms burning with exertion as she tried to create distance between herself and the massive predator. The rescue board wobbled beneath her, threatening to tip over with each desperate stroke. From the shore, Jake and Clara shouted her name, their voices blending with the rising panic of the crowd. The beachgoers watched in stunned silence, their excitement turning to dread as the scene unfolded before them. Children clung to their parents, their wide eyes fixed on the dark, looming shape in the water. "Mia, get out of there!" Jake yelled, his hands gripping the rope as if willing it to pull her back to safety. But Mia knew there was no outrunning the orca. It was too fast, too powerful. She glanced over her shoulder and saw the creature closing the distance, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a blade. Her heart pounded in her chest as she braced for impact, her mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next. The orca struck the rescue board with a force that sent Mia flying into the water. She hit the surface hard, the shock of the cold water stealing the air from her lungs. For a moment, she was disoriented, the world around her reduced to a chaotic swirl of bubbles and motion. She struggled to right herself, her hands clawing at the water as she fought to resurface. When she broke through, gasping for air, she found herself face to face with the orca. Its massive head loomed above her, water streaming from its sleek, black and white body. Its dark eyes locked onto hers, their intensity sending a shiver down her spine. It let out a deep, guttural sound, a noise that resonated through the water and into Mia's very core. She froze, her instincts screaming at her to swim, to fight, to do anything but remain still. And yet, something in the orca's gaze held her in place. It wasn't anger or malice that she saw in its eyes. It was confusion, fear, and perhaps even pain. The creature was as much a victim as she was, trapped in a situation that neither of them fully understood. The orca moved closer, its powerful body creating ripples that rocked Mia in water. She tried to remain calm, her breaths coming in shallow gasps as she kept her eyes locked on the animal. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm not going to hurt you." The orca tilted its head, its eyes studying her with an almost curious expression. For a moment, Mia thought she might have reached it, that the connection she had felt earlier was still intact. But then, in a sudden burst of motion, the orca opened its jaws and clamped down on the rescue board floating nearby. The sound of splintering would fill the air as the board was reduced to shards, the orca's strength on full display. The crowd on the shore gasped in unison, their fear for Mia's safety palpable. Jake and Clara exchanged panicked glances, their hands tightening on the rope as they prepared for the worst. Mia's mind raced as she watched the destruction. The orca wasn't attacking her. It was lashing out at the board, perhaps seeing it as the source of its pain. She clung to this realization, using it to steady herself as she considered her next move. "You're still scared," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. "But I'm not your enemy." The orca's aggression subsided as quickly as it had flared. It released the remains of the board and let out a low, rumbling exhale, its breath misting in the air. Mia took this as her chance to slowly back away, her movements deliberate and unthreatening. She needed to create distance without provoking the animal further. But as she began to retreat, a sharp pain shot through her leg. She looked down and saw a trail of crimson seeping into the water. A piece of the shattered board had cut into her calf, leaving a deep gash. The blood spread quickly, carried by the currents, and Mia's heart sank as she realized the danger it posed. The orca's behavior changed immediately. Its movements became more erratic, its body circling Mia with increasing urgency. The scent of blood had triggered something primal, a response ingrained in its very nature. Mia felt a surge of panic as the creature drew closer, its massive form cutting off any chance of escape. On the shore, Jake and Clara sprang into action. Clara grabbed a flare gun from the equipment shed, her hand shaking as she loaded it. "We need to distract it," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We can't let it hurt her." Jake nodded, his jaw set as he grabbed a second rope. "I'll get the jet ski. We need to get her out of there." The crowd watched in tense silence as Clara fired the flare into the sky. The bright burst of light and smoke drew the orca's attention, its head snapping toward the source of the noise. It paused, its body stilling as it assessed the new threat. Jake seized the opportunity, revving the jet ski's engine and speeding toward Mia. Mia's relief was short-lived. The orca, now fully alert, turned its focus back to her. It dove beneath the surface, its sleek body disappearing into the depths. Mia felt a surge of dread as she scanned the water, her eyes searching for any sign of its return. The seconds stretched into an eternity, each one filled with the weight of uncertainty. When the orca resurfaced, it was directly in front of her. Its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth that glinted in the sunlight. Mia's instinct screamed at her to move, but her body refused to respond. She was frozen, caught in the grip of fear and resignation. Just as the orca lunged, Jake arrived on the jet ski, his hand outstretched toward Mia. "Grab on," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Mia reached for him, her fingers brushing against his just as the orca's powerful jaws snapped shut. The force of the water sent her tumbling, her grip slipping from Jake's hand as she was pulled under. The world became a blur of motion and sound, the water filling her ears and blinding her vision. On the shore, the crowd erupted into chaos. Parents shielded their children's eyes, while others shouted in disbelief. Clara fired another flare, her voice cracking as she called out for Mia. Jake circled the area on the jet ski, his eyes scanning the water desperately. "Come on, Mia," he muttered under his breath. "Don't give up." The seconds dragged on, each one heavier than the last. And then, as if by a miracle, Mia broke the surface. She gasped for air, her face pale, and her eyes wide with shock. Jake sped toward her, his relief evident as he reached out once more. This time, Mia grabbed hold, her grip firm despite the pain and exhaustion that racked her body. Jake pulled her onto the jet ski, his arms steady as he held her in place. "I've got you," he said, his voice filled with reassurance. "You're safe now." But as they sped toward the shore, Mia's gaze shifted back to the orca. It remained in the water, its dark eyes watching her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter was far from over. The jet ski reached the shore, and Jake carefully helped Mia off, his hand steady despite the tremors running through his own body. The crowd surged forward, murmurs of relief and awe rippling through the onlookers. Clara rushed to Mia's side, her face pale but determined as she assessed the gash on Mia's leg. "We need to stop the bleeding," Clara said, tearing a strip of fabric from her uniform and tying it tightly above the wound. Mia winced but nodded, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. Her soaked hair clung to her face, and her hands trembled as she clutched Jake's arm for support. "You're lucky to be alive," Jake said, his voice low but laced with relief. "That thing, it wasn't going to stop." Mia shook her head, her gaze fixed on the water. The orca was still there, its dorsal fin cutting through the waves as it circled just beyond the breakers. It wasn't retreating, nor was it behaving aggressively. Instead, it seemed to be watching, its movements slower now, almost calculated. "It wasn't trying to hurt me," Mia said softly, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. At least, not at first. It was scared. Jake and Clara exchanged skeptical glances, but neither of them argued. The events they had just witnessed defied explanation, leaving everyone grappling for understanding. As paramedics arrived to tend to Mia's injuries, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Parents gathered their children, leading them away from the water's edge with murmured reassurances. The beach's once lively atmosphere had been replaced by a tense quiet, the memory of the orca's presence lingering in the air. Mia refused to leave. Despite the paramedics' insistence that she be taken to the hospital, she remained seated on the sand, her gaze fixed on the ocean. "I need to know why it's still here," she said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "There's something off about its behavior." Clara crouched beside her, her expression a mix of concern and frustration. "Mia, you've done enough. You nearly died out there. Let someone else handle this." But Mia shook her head. "It's not about me. That orca is in trouble. I can feel it." Jake sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "Then let's call in the marine biologists. They're better equipped to handle this than we are." "I already did," Clara interjected. "They're on their way. But it could take hours for them to get here." Mia's jaw tightened, her resolve unshaken. "Then I'll wait." The hours passed slowly, the sun sinking lower in the sky as evening approached. The orca remained in the same spot, its dark form a constant presence just beyond the waves. It seemed to grow calmer as the beach emptied, its movements less frantic. Mia watched it closely, her mind racing with questions. Why had it come so close to shore? Why had it targeted her? And why hadn't it left? When the marine biologists finally arrived, their presence brought a sense of relief. Dr. Elena Rivera, a renowned expert in marine mammal behavior, stepped out of the vehicle, her sharp eyes scanning the water. She carried a clipboard in one hand and a calm authority that immediately commanded attention. "Tell me everything," Dr. Rivera said, her tone brisk but empathetic as she addressed Mia. "What happened out there?" Mia recounted the events in detail, sparing nothing. She described the orca's initial distress, the fishing net, and its sudden shift in behavior after being freed. Dr. Rivera listened intently, her expression thoughtful as she took notes. "This is unusual," Dr. Rivera said finally, her gaze shifting to the water. "Orcas are intelligent, highly social creatures. For one to behave this way, alone, erratic, it suggests something is deeply wrong. What do we do now?" Jake asked, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Dr. Rivera adjusted her glasses, her lips pressed into a thin line. "We observe, and if necessary, we intervene." As night fell, the biologists set up equipment along the shore, including hydrophones to monitor the orca's vocalizations. Mia stayed close, her leg bandaged but her determination unwavering. She felt a strange connection to the creature, a bond forged in the chaos of their encounter. She couldn't explain it, but she knew she needed to see this through. The hydrophones picked up a series of low-frequency clicks and whistles, the orca's calls echoing through the speakers. Dr. Rivera frowned as she listened, her fingers tapping a rhythm on her clipboard. "It's calling for something, or someone," she murmured. "What does that mean?" Clara asked, her voice tinged with unease. "It could be searching for its pod," Dr. Rivera replied. "Or it could be mourning." The weight of her words settled over the group, silencing any further questions. Mia's chest tightened as she stared at the water, her heart aching for the creature. Alone in a vast, unfamiliar ocean, it was lost, just like her. In the early hours of the morning, a breakthrough came. The orca moved closer to shore, its massive body gliding through the shallows with surprising grace. Dr. Rivera and her team approached cautiously, their movements slow and deliberate to avoid startling the animal. Mia stayed behind, watching anxiously as the scientists worked. Using a long pole with a mounted camera, the team examined the orca's body for signs of injury or distress. What they found was both shocking and heartbreaking. Deep scars crisscrossed its sides, evidence of previous encounters with fishing gear or boat propellers. One of its pectoral fins appeared to be partially paralyzed, hanging limp as it moved. "It's been through hell," Dr. Rivera said, her voice heavy with emotion. "No wonder it's behaving this way. It's in pain. Can we help it?" Mia asked, stepping forward despite the protests of her colleagues. Dr. Rivera hesitated. "We can try, but it won't be easy." The team devised a plan to administer antibiotics and painkillers to the orca, hoping to alleviate its suffering. Using a specialized dart gun, they delivered the medication from a safe distance, ensuring minimal stress for the animal. Mia watched with bated breath, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. The orca let out a series of low clicks as the dart struck its side, its body tensing briefly before relaxing. It remained still, its dark eyes scanning the group with an intelligence that was impossible to ignore. Mia felt a pang of hope as she met its gaze, silently willing it to trust them. For the next several hours, the team monitored the orca's response to the treatment. Its movements grew less erratic, its breathing steadier. By dawn, it had ventured slightly further from shore, its dorsal fin cutting through the water with a grace that hadn't been there before. The beach was quiet as the sun rose, its golden light casting a warm glow over the sand and surf. Mia stood at the water's edge, her thoughts a whirlwind of relief and uncertainty. The orca was healing, but its future remained uncertain. Would it find its pod? Would it survive in the wild? Or would it return, seeking the comfort of human connection once more? As if sensing her thoughts, the orca breached the surface one last time, its massive body rising into the air before crashing back into the waves. Mia smiled through her tears, her heart swelling with gratitude. This was a moment she would carry with her forever, a reminder of the fragility and resilience of life and the unbreakable bond between humans and the natural world. The early morning light bathed the beach in a soft glow, and the first hints of warmth began to replace the chill of the night. Mia stood silently at the water's edge, her gaze fixed on the orca's distant dorsal fin as it drifted further out to sea. Though it had moved farther from shore, it lingered, its movements measured and deliberate, as though tethered by an invisible thread to the events that had unfolded. Dr. Rivera approached Mia, her clipboard tucked under one arm. The biologist's face carried the weariness of a long night, but her sharp eyes glinted with determination. "We've done all we can for now," she said gently. "The antibiotics should help with the infections, and its injuries will heal over time. But this next phase is up to the orca itself." Mia nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. She felt a mixture of relief and sadness, her mind replaying the terrifying encounter that had almost cost her everything. Yet, despite her exhaustion, a part of her longed to understand the deeper story behind the creature's distress. Why had it sought the shore in the first place? What had led to the scars it bore? "You think it'll find its pod?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Rivera hesitated, the weight of the question settling between them. "It's hard to say. Orcas are incredibly social animals. They rely on their pod for survival, for hunting, for everything. Being alone like this, it's unusual. But we've seen cases where solitary orcas integrate into new groups, so there's hope." Mia sighed, her hands resting on her hips as she looked out at the horizon. "Hope," she murmured. "That's all we can give it." As the morning progressed, the beach began to fill with the usual throng of visitors. Families set up umbrellas and towels, children ran laughing toward the waves, and surfers carried their boards into the surf. The events of the previous day seemed like a distant memory to most, but for Mia, they remained fresh and vivid, etched into her mind like a scar. Jake and Clara joined her near the Lifeguard station, their expressions a mix of concern and admiration. Clara handed Mia a cup of coffee, the steam curling into the air between them. "How's the leg?" she asked, nodding toward the bandage peeking out from under Mia's uniform. "It'll heal," Mia replied, taking a sip. "But I'm more worried about that orca. It's still out there." Jake followed her gaze to the water, where the fin occasionally surfaced before disappearing again. "You really made an impression on it," he said, his tone half teasing. "I don't think I've ever seen anything like that." Clara smirked, nudging Jake in the ribs. "That's because Mia has a way with trouble. If there's chaos to be found, she's in the middle of it." Mia chuckled softly, though her eyes remained distant. "I don't think it's chaos," she said. "It's connection." That orca, it wasn't just lashing out. It was reaching out. Dr. Rivera interrupted their conversation, her presence commanding their attention. "We're going to track its movements for the next few days," she announced. "I've contacted a research vessel that'll be here by this afternoon. They'll deploy a drone and a satellite tag to monitor it." Mia's eyebrows lifted. "A tag? Won't that stress it out more?" Dr. Rivera shook her head. "We use a minimally invasive process. It's a small device that attaches to the dorsal fin. It won't harm the animal, but it'll give us invaluable data, its location, its dive patterns, even its vocalizations." Jake whistled softly. "High-tech stuff." Dr. Rivera smiled faintly. "It's what we need to understand creatures like this, and to protect them." Mia felt a flicker of hope. If the orca's movements could be tracked, perhaps they could learn more about its past and what had driven it to seek help near the shore. But the thought of tagging it also brought a pang of guilt. Would the orca see it as another intrusion, another human interference in its already difficult life? By midday, the research vessel arrived, a sleek ship equipped with state-of-the-art technology. The crew worked quickly and efficiently, deploying a small inflatable boat to approach the orca. Mia watched from the shore, her heart in her throat as they neared the massive creature. Despite their reassurances, she couldn't shake the fear that something might go wrong. The orca, however, remained surprisingly calm. It floated just beneath the surface, its dark eyes watching the researchers with a mix of curiosity and caution. When they gently affixed the satellite tag to its dorsal fin, they let out a series of low clicks and whistles but made no attempt to flee. Dr. Rivera, who was monitoring the operation through binoculars, let out a relieved sigh. "It's cooperating," she said. "That's a good sign." Mia couldn't help but smile. Maybe it knows we're trying to help. As the afternoon wore on, the satellite tag began transmitting data, providing the team with real-time updates on the orca's movements. It was clear that the creature wasn't straying far from the shore, its pattern suggesting a reluctance to venture into deeper waters. Dr. Rivera speculated that this behavior could be linked to its injuries or a psychological need for proximity to the humans who had aided it. But as night fell once again, something unexpected happened. The orca began vocalizing more frequently, its clicks and whistles filling the hydrophones with an urgency that hadn't been present before. Dr. Rivera and her team scrambled to analyze the sounds, their faces growing more concerned with each passing moment. "It's calling for something specific," Dr. Rivera said, her voice tight. "But I can't determine what." Mia, who had been listening intently, felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Could it be calling for its pod? Dr. Rivera nodded slowly. "Possibly. Or it could be something else." Orcas are known to form strong bonds, not just with their pods but with individual animals, or even humans. It's possible that it's trying to communicate with us. The idea sent a shiver down Mia's spine. The orca, with all its intelligence and power, was reaching out across an invisible divide, trying to bridge the gap between its world and theirs. She felt an overwhelming urge to respond, to let it know that it wasn't alone. Without waiting for permission, Mia grabbed a handheld hydrophone and waded into the shallows. Jake and Clara called after her, their voices filled with alarm, but she ignored them. This was something she needed to do. Kneeling in the water, she held the hydrophone close to her mouth and began to hum. It was a simple tune, soft and melodic, a lullaby her mother used to sing to her as a child. The sound carried through the hydrophone, merging with the ocean's natural symphony. For a moment, there was silence. Then the orca responded. A low, resonant click echoed back through the hydrophone, followed by a series of high-pitched whistles. The exchange continued, a back and forth of sound that felt like a conversation. Mia closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of the orca's calls guide her responses. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a connection that transcended words, a bond forged in the language of the sea. On the shore, the researchers and lifeguards watched in stunned silence, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. Jake shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Of course it's Mia," he muttered. "Who else could pull something like this off?" Clara nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "She's incredible." As the exchange continued, the orca began to move closer to shore, its massive body cutting through the waves with surprising grace. Mia held her ground, her heart pounding as the creature approached. When it finally stopped, its head rose above the water, and its dark eyes locked onto hers. Mia felt a surge of emotion as she reached out, her hand hovering just above the water's surface. "You're not alone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're here for you." The orca let out a soft, low rumble, a sound that resonated through Mia's very soul. In that moment, the divide between their worlds seemed to vanish, replaced by a profound understanding that words could never capture. The rumble from the orca seemed to vibrate through the air and water alike, creating a connection between Mia and the magnificent creature that felt both ancient and deeply personal. The crowd on the beach watched in reverent silence, as though they had stumbled upon a sacred ritual. Even Dr. Rivera, with all her years of experience, looked transfixed, her clipboard forgotten at her side. Mia extended her hand further, letting it skim the surface of the water. The orca responded, its massive head lowering slightly as if bowing to her. It remained still, its dark eyes fixed on Mia with an intelligence that was impossible to ignore. Mia's heart swelled as she whispered, "You're safe now. We'll help you find your way." The moment felt timeless, as though the world had paused to witness this fragile truce between human and nature. But the stillness was soon broken by a sudden shift in the orca's demeanor. It let out a series of sharp, urgent clicks, its body moving restlessly through the shallows. "What's it doing?" Jake called from the shore, his voice tinged with concern. Mia turned to Dr. Rivera, who was already analyzing the hydrophone's feed. "It's signaling something," the biologist replied, her brow furrowed. "The clicks are directional. They're aimed at something out in the water." Mia felt a chill run down her spine. Could it be another orca? The team scrambled to adjust the hydrophones, focusing their equipment on the area indicated by the orca's signals. The tension was palpable as they listened for any signs of a response. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the only sounds the rhythmic crash of the waves and the faint hum of the equipment. Then, faint but unmistakable, a reply came through the speakers. A series of whistles and clicks echoed back, their cadence strikingly similar to the orca's earlier calls. The realization hit Mia like a lightning bolt. The orca wasn't alone after all. "It's a pod," Dr. Rivera confirmed, her voice filled with awe, or at least part of one. "They're nearby." A wave of relief washed over Mia, but was quickly tempered by concern. "Do you think they'll accept it back?" she asked. "After everything it's been through?" Dr. Rivera's expression softened. "Orcas are deeply social, but they can also be territorial. If this pod is part of its family, there's a good chance they'll welcome it. But if they're strangers, well, we'll just have to see." The researchers wasted no time preparing for the reunion. Using the satellite tag's data and the hydrophone's readings, they triangulated the pod's location and guided the lone orca toward it. The creature seemed to understand their intentions, following the team's signals with a determination that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Mia watched from the shore, her chest tightening with each passing moment. She wanted to follow, to be there when the orca found its pod, but she knew her presence could disrupt the delicate process. Instead, she stood with Jake and Clara, their eyes fixed on the horizon. "They'll let us know what happens," Clara said, placing a reassuring hand on Mia's shoulder. "You've done more than enough." Mia nodded, though her thoughts were far from settled. "I just hope it finds what it's looking for." Hours passed, and the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the beach. The research vessel remained visible in the distance, its crew working tirelessly to facilitate the reunion. Finally, as twilight descended, a message crackled through the radio. "This is Dr. Rivera. The pod has accepted the lone orca." Repeat, the pod has accepted it. A cheer erupted from the researchers and onlookers alike, the tension of the past days dissolving into pure, unbridled joy. Mia felt tears streaming down her face as she let out a shaky laugh. "It's safe," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's finally safe." Jake pulled her into a hug, his relief evident in the tightness of his grip. "You did it, Mia. You gave it a chance." Clara joined them, her smile wide and genuine. "I think we all needed this reminder that even in the face of everything, there's still hope." The reunion marked the end of an incredible journey, but it was also a new beginning for the orca, for Mia, and for everyone who had witnessed the extraordinary events. The researchers continued to monitor the pod, their data providing invaluable insights into the complex social dynamics of these magnificent creatures. For Mia, the experience became a turning point. She found herself more connected to her work than ever before, her love for the ocean reignited by the bond she had formed with the orca. She spent her days educating beachgoers about marine conservation, sharing the story of the lone orca to inspire others to protect the natural world. But even as life returned to its usual rhythm, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that her connection with the orca was far from over. She often returned to the beach at dawn, scanning the horizon for any sign of the pod. And though the orca never returned, she carried its memory with her, a reminder of the power of empathy, resilience, and the unbreakable ties that bind all living beings. One morning, as Mia walked along the shoreline, she noticed a small group of children gathered near the water's edge. They were pointing excitedly at something in the surf, their laughter and shouts carrying on the breeze. Curious, Mia approached, her heart skipping a beat when she saw what had captured their attention. A pod of dolphins was swimming just offshore, their sleek bodies leaping gracefully through the waves. Among them was a familiar dorsal fin, marked by the faint scar where the satellite tag had once been. Mia's breath caught in her throat as the orca breached the surface, its massive form glistening in the sunlight. The children cheered, their joy infectious as they watched the spectacle. Mia felt tears welling up once again, her heart swelling with gratitude. The orca had returned, not out of need, but as a gesture of connection, a reminder that their bond had not been forgotten. As the pod swam away, disappearing into the endless expanse of the ocean, Mia stood rooted to the spot, her hand raised in a silent farewell. She knew she might never see the orca again, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the lesson it had taught her, a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. The beach returned to its usual bustling energy, but for Mia, it would always hold a deeper significance. It was a place of transformation, a stage where humanity and nature had come together in an extraordinary dance. And though the waves would wash away the footprints and the memories of those who came and went, the story of the lone orca would live on, carried by the currents and the hearts of those who had witnessed its journey. For Mia, the ocean was no longer just a vast, unknowable expanse. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a reminder that even in the darkest depths, there was always a light waiting to guide the way.